This is Dylan Almendraw for the Santa Ana History Room, the Santa Ana Public Library. Today is the 15th of November, 2017. We have Ryan Chase here for an interview. Good morning, Mr. Chase.
Good morning.
Now, can we start with your history in Orange County, Santa Ana?
Sure. My great-grandfather came to downtown Santa Ana in 1919. He was in the Russian army and as a bootmaker and wanted to get out. He arrived in Detroit, and my grandfather was actually born there. They went to Chicago and then had to make a decision. They wanted some warm weather and decided to either go to Florida or California. And someone had said, go to Southern California. There's a lot of growth happening, and so that's where they went. And they got to L.A., and they heard there was more growth south of L.A., so they went south and ended up actually in Anaheim, got off the train, and wanted to open up a shoe store. Well, sure enough, there was already a shoe store in Anaheim. So got back on the train, stopped in Santa Ana. There wasn't a shoe store, and sure enough, that's why we ended up here. So kind of a crazy story of how our family kind of started our roots in Orange County and Santa Ana, but that's kind of the story. So
Where was the first store?
first store was 316 East 4th Street. It's a building we own today, and it was called Eureka Shoes.
That's cool.
More or less on the corner of 4th and French, right next to American Barber Shop.
Did the family grow out of the shoemaking business?
Yeah, so my great-grandfather, that was kind of his game, but then my grandfather was very entrepreneurial, and as early as like 5 years old was starting to do little businesses on the side, newspapers for the farmers to put fruit in to sell. He owned his own gas station actually in Santa Ana at 12 years old. The tanks actually leaked, so he was running a gaming thing in the back where they used to have a thing like almost like a pin board, but there were prizes behind it. So he actually had the pin board supplement and support the gas station because the tanks were leaking. So I mean, some of these stories are just kind of mind-boggling. But he was running numerous businesses, went into the Navy, served in World War II, among some other things with boats and whatnot, and then started Army surplus after the war. He went to he actually went to Santa College, and then he went to USC through the GI Bill, but then started opening up Army surplus stores in downtown Santa Ana after that.
Was that the Army Surplus store on 4th Street?
I believe he had 3 on 4th Street at the peak, 2 or 3 of them, yes.
Wow.
And that business kind of turned into what was called something called the World's Fair, and then from that business turned into something called the Wild West stores. And the Wild West stores was a chain of about 35 retail stores. It was I believe the biggest seller of Levi jeans in the early 80s or late 70s when he was at least locally here. And it was I kind of compared to like the Tilly's of today.
Okay.
Kind of a very hip for the time, but
yes.
If you look back today, you kind of like what were they doing? But kind of a Western wear vibe to it, but trying to also attract mainstream people.
I assume you grew up with his grandfather.
Yes.
What was it like growing up with him and having that influence?
Sure. I came in the family business about 14 years ago. My family's I'm the 4th generation to be in the family business, and part of the reason I came in earlier than I would have probably planned or my family would have liked is because my grandfather was still alive at the time, and I wanted to learn from him. And so I came in the business and I worked for him for maybe 7-8 years, if maybe longer than that, maybe almost 10 years. And to get a perspective from someone that's grown up, living through the Great Depression, and just having that years of knowledge and experience, and it's pretty mind-boggling what he was able to accomplish and what he was able to do, and to have his perspective. And then also my father, who's the second generation, if you will, or another generation. So it's almost like you go in a room and you got myself, you got my father, you got my grandfather, and the dichotomy of understanding and experience and lifestyle and everything else is just so different and so unique. So when we started doing some of the work down here years ago, my grandfather didn't really understand what we were doing, and I tell people, how do you tell a 96-year-old guy what a foodie and a hipster are? And he obviously didn't get what was happening, and he actually thought when we reopened the Yost Theater that we were actually paying people to be there, so that he thought all these people are here. How'd you get them here? Well, how much did you pay them? Kind of thing. Like he couldn't believe that there were that many people in downtown Santa Ana at night for like a cool hip thing going on. So I think we've come a long way obviously since then, but yeah.
Did your father have any goals for Santa Ana specifically with the businesses here?
So my father actually redeveloped Fiesta Marketplace with my grandfather in the 1980s.
Wow.
It was one of the first large-scale mixed-use projects geared towards the Latino demographic in the country. They got numerous awards from HUD and from the federal government and everything else, and it was very successful and very, I would say, very received a lot of accolades when it was originally built. And that project was successful for a long time. Very successful to the point where the rents were actually higher in Santa Ana than Irvine and Newport Beach,
Wow.
10, 20 years ago. Well, that frankly has changed, and that's part of the reason we've also made some changes. So, frankly, what happened was our net operating income, or what we the rent we generate from our property
Yeah.
was cut almost in half in the early 2000s, before the Great Depression. And so we started to ask ourselves, what's going on here? And it really was kind of a very mind-boggling, complex question of why are numbers going down? It's been so successful for so long, and everything else, and what's changed? And so what happened was through a lot of discussion with other people that are in the business world, particularly the Northgate Gonzales market guys who are very in the trenches, if you will, and kind of really understand that customer base, said we're seeing the same thing. The second and third generation are becoming more Americanized. They're becoming more inculcated into American society. So whereas 20, 30 years ago, their parents had no other option to go and didn't really feel comfortable going anywhere else, i.e. 4th Street or i.e. Northgate Gonzales Market, now they can go to Ralph's, or now they can go to Main Place of the Block. So there was a fundamental shift in shopping patterns, and frankly, corporate America figured it out. If I was corporate America, why wouldn't I want the biggest growing demographic in the country, the most loyal customer base, huge disposable incomes, big families? I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. And so corporate America figured it out. And not only did they figure it out, they took it to the next level. They marketed it bilingually. They brought in bilingual help. They even started carrying Spanish products specific to the states in Mexico. So you might have a product from Sonora, or a product from Guadalajara, or a product from wherever. I mean, when you see that detailed niche of marketing and I guess, offerings, you know that there's something has changed. And so again, whereas 20, 30 years ago, you came to downtown Santa Ana because that's all you could go. That's all you knew. That's all there was to go to. Similar to Broadway in downtown LA, or Huntington Park, or San Fernando in the Valley. All those were regional Latino shopping areas. And what happened was again, those changes took place. And if you look now, for example, in downtown LA on Broadway, that street is transitioning very similar to i.e. 4th Street, where you had the Ace Hotel open up, you had Umami Delicatessen open up, you had LA Brewing Company open up, you had Grand Central Market, which is on the tail end of Broadway, kind of help influencing that. But then also now you're getting the retailers, the Urban Outfitters, and the Gap, and some of these very high-end sneaker companies and shoe stores are opening up. So you're starting to see that transition, which again is happening in downtown Santa Ana as well. So to me, this shift that's happening is not something that's only happening in Santa Ana, but it's really happening everywhere. And again, we're just trying to kind of, I think, model off what we're seeing successful in other places.
Now, growing up here as a young person, what were your impressions of downtown Santa Ana and Orange County as a whole?
I grew up in Irvine. My mother and my uncle grew up in Santa Ana. When I first started working in Santa Ana, I was probably about 7th grade. I was working on my family's construction truck, painting graffiti, emptying trash cans. And frankly, it was a really cool area. Again, growing up in Irvine, I didn't have that kind of downtown city vibe, so I really appreciated it. But at the same time, there was no question there were some challenges down there. I think I really appreciated the challenges when I got out of college, or at least more when I was a little older, where I noticed the open prostitution, I noticed the open drug dealing, I noticed the gang members everywhere. I mean, there were some challenges down there. Similar to the early 80s when my father and my grandfather helped redevelop Fiesta Marketplace, the same issue. There were a lot of problems, and part of the reason they redeveloped Fiesta Marketplace is because a lot of the local merchants were going to have their properties condemned by the city because the city wanted to redo the whole thing. And so my dad and my grandfather stepped in, put their letter of credit up to basically guarantee the project we had done, which the other, frankly, other merchants didn't have the wherewithal to do, and basically save those businesses and save those merchants and those landlords those properties. So, again, it's been a long road, and a lot of things have taken place since then. But I think, again, we have to compete to survive, and that's what we're trying to do.
What are you working with right now to keep this momentum going in Orange County, Santa Ana specifically?
Sure. Can I digress for a second to the last question? Please. I think it's also important to add, like I alluded to earlier, there were some challenges with the downtown and safety and whatnot. Yeah. I think by the recent activity and activation of the downtown, more things being open late, more things being open period, it's really created a safer environment. Are there some challenges with drinking and stuff like that? Yes. But at the same time, the challenges that were before, I think, have been mitigated to a big degree. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with, again, activity on the ground, but also a comprehensive effort by the downtown organizations, the Santa Ana Police Department, downtown security agencies, and again, the local community that's really stepped up and made an effort to, I think, stand up for what they believe in and stand up for their community. And I think the broken windows theory has been applied a little bit, where people are not taking even a little thing anymore. Where before it was kind of like, oh, it's not a big deal or whatever. Now even the little things, the litter, the broken window, this etching in the window, those are little things that before were blown over and now are being addressed, because again, if you address the small things, you address the big things and send a message.
Historically, 4th Street has always been the center of food, culture, and entertainment in Santa Ana, and you're keeping that rhythm alive. Now, where do you see this going for the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Sure. Look at Southern California as a whole is very dense. It's a huge population center, and I think people don't really appreciate what Orange County is in that piece of the puzzle, if you will. Orange County has almost 4 million people.
Yeah.
If you were to put Orange County tied to other cities or compared to other cities around the country, we're one of the biggest. So I think people don't really understand the magnitude. And so you think of Orange County, you think of it suburbia, but really it's a big city. And so, the idea of mass transit and the idea of some of the things that people are talking about now, sound crazy or foreign to some, but to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, if you looked at other cities that are a lot smaller than us, have certain things that again, Santa Ana doesn't have. And I think Santa Ana and again, Orange County as a whole, I think is going that direction. If you look at what's happening, things are getting more dense, traffic's getting worse. People want to live, work, and play in more localized areas, and I think that's part of what's happening as a trend nationally.
So you're calling Orange County a metropolis?
I am.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a demographer or anything to that degree to say exactly what it is by definition, but I just think anecdotally, you got 4 million people in a concise area that I don't think is appreciated as that, and I don't think has the power, or at least doesn't leverage that power like other cities that have those kind of population centers and those economic bases. I don't know the economic base of Orange County relative to the country, but I would venture to guess that it's more than some states, and I would probably guess I would be right.
Now, a lot of new companies, a lot of new business owners, they want to take away the old buildings. They want to change the character of downtown. What is your stance with that?
I think without having the historic buildings, what do we have? I mean, to me, the historic buildings and the historic nature of the downtown, and frankly, Santa Ana downtown having the largest housing stock, the largest stock of historic buildings in Orange County, is something that we have to really, take advantage of in a sense. I think, frankly, downtown Anaheim, for example, got rid of all their old buildings, and they're definitely coming back and doing some things now. But you can't recreate old buildings. You can't create that vibe, that energy, that architecture, that message that it sends, that urban feeling. And I think Santa Ana again has that. I grew up in Irvine, and I have a lot of friends that had never been to Santa Ana before. I mean, my wife went to Modern Day High School. I don't think it spent much time even here. And most people that I do talk to that have come to the city of Santa Ana or downtown come because they're going to the Civic Center for jury duty, and so I think for people to actually be introduced to what's down here, it's a pleasant surprise, and it's almost like, well, there's a real city in Orange County. I never really knew that, or I never knew how close it was, and I think also people don't really appreciate how close it really is. I mean, I can get from Santa Ana to the beach in 20 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, you don't realize that, and you think, oh my God, we're so in the middle of the county, but no, you're really not, So I think, yeah.
Now, with the changes going on politically in Santa Ana, how are you prepared to meet those changes and those changing tastes?
Sure. Look, I don't have all the answers. I think the reality is that market forces, capitalism, supply and demand are going to dictate what happens regardless of what I do. Am I able to maybe augment or embellish or curate certain things above and beyond that or in that same process? Sure. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen is going to happen. I think that it's happening all over the country, and I think the reality, again, back to the trends, is people want to live, work, and play in more urban environments, and they don't want to commute as much. So if you look around the country at other places that that are having the same issues or the same experiences, you look at Brooklyn, New York, or even Harlem, New York, or Long Beach, or Oakland, California. These are cities that maybe weren't so exciting or sexy or attractive 10, 20 years ago, but now have become beyond attractive, and again, for the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Do you feel that Santa Ana and Orange County, or Santa Ana, should stay competitive with the market and with these changing tastes, with these perceptions of what the incoming generation and the current generations want?
Look, again, it's a challenge. I think that the community that's been here for a long time is established and feels a sense of it's their community, which I get and appreciate. At the same time, is supply and demand dictates that things are going to change. I wish I could say that no one will be displaced or that no one will be affected by this. And are there people going to be negatively affected? Sure. Are there people going to be positively affected? Sure. I think there's no easy answer. I think the reality is cost of living is going up to such a degree that I think I read something the other day that you got to make like $80,000 a year to have a one-bedroom apartment in Orange County. I mean, who makes $80,000 a year to make a one-bedroom apartment? It doesn't pencil for me. So I don't comprehend how I can really address that. I think it's a much more of a larger scale issue with the feds and the state and the county of how to address these affordability issues. And I think the reality is this too is, look, we need more affordable housing. We also need more professional housing. We need everything. Other cities are building all types of products to attract everybody, and I think we're not. We're building very minimal new product and professional product and a lot of what I call affordable product. And again, we need that. But at the same time, we need everything. And I think the challenge that Santa Ana has and had for a long time is we have the brain drain. If you're successful in this city, a lot of the time you leave. And the challenge that I have is if you're not providing housing for the young professionals and these people that are coming into the city or want to come into the city or want to start their business here, then they're not going to come because they need to live here. So I think by providing a multitude of housing options and diversity of housing will really help the city long term. And again, by no means does that mean that we don't need affordable housing. We need everything, but I think that it's critical that we offer everything. And if we don't, then we're gonna get what we get from that.
Now, how can we best accommodate these people with live, work, play?
Sure. I think a few things. I think that again, the housing stock itself is critical, but I also think part of it is just them getting more immersed in what's happening with the new businesses that are coming in, that are starting here, whether it's an internship, whether it's a startup job. I mean, numerous companies I know, for example, in downtown are bringing people on, whether it's a startup position or whether it's a position a little higher up. But again, it's getting ingrained in this kind of what I would call more cutting edge, tech or marketing or PR or creative, if you will, industry. And I think there's a lot more juice and upside for this generation in that realm, if you will. Not many people are going excited about working a 9-to-5 corporate job anymore. And I think that the millennial generation is looking for more this urban environment and again, jobs that are tied to that. So I think that as Santa Ana continues to grow and new businesses keep happening here, that the youth and the community will also benefit from that.
Now, you're a father.
Yes.
What,
2 kids.
What do you want the scape of Orange County to look like for your kids when they are our age?
What I want it to look like, I mean, I don't know if I have a look per se. I just think that, again, like I mentioned earlier, I think that the densities are going to continue to go up. There's minimal raw land left in Orange County. If there is any, it's minimal in South County, and there's a few pockets, throughout the more inner, dense, call it urban side of the county. But at the end of the day, there's not much land left. So what happens? You go up. Because people want to live here. The job market is very strong. The weather's great. We're in Southern California, and if you want to live here, you're gonna have to pay the freight, and that's the issue. Is again, more and more people want to come here. Prices are gonna go up, and that's just the unfortunate reality, or that's the reality of capitalism. And so, when that happens, again, more people want to come in. Either it goes up or they go out, and I think there's gonna be a combination of both.
Do you feel there's a place for the integration of history in a more spotlighting history in this new and burgeoning community in Santa Ana, Orange County?
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, Orange County doesn't have a lot of history. I mean, in the scheme of things, our county is how old? 100 and something years? I mean,
1869,
so
1889.
150 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about again, in the scheme of things, it's not that long. I mean, you go to the East Coast, which is 300 or 400 years old in the scheme of things, or at least the most of the newer stuff, right? The American stuff, if you will. And even then, you go to Europe and things are thousands of years old. So it's like, Orange County doesn't have a lot of history, so I think if we can showcase what we do have, and do it in a way that I think relates to this younger generation, I think it does bring something unique and different. And again, I think for most kids growing up in this county, they don't appreciate what's happened here in the past, or don't even get a lot of it. So I think if we can again explain that in a way and curate it in a way that is understandable to them, and I think relatable to them. There's definitely some value in that. And again, I think right now it's not really being done very much.
Okay. Like outside of this room, how would you approach young people, to embrace the books behind you?
Well, I think getting a kid to read a book is going to be a challenge. I'm just being realistic. I mean, I don't even read that many books. I know I hate to say that, but I'm very well read. I read a lot of articles, and I'm always online reading. But in terms of actual books and history books, I think most kids so go to read an encyclopedia. I mean, it's like the kid's gonna look at you like, what do you mean? What is an encyclopedia for like kids this generation, right? But I think if you could somehow tie it to more of a culture tie, whether it's food, entertainment, music, and say, look, this was we did a street breakfast in downtown last year. Where it was done in the
Breakfast Club.
Breakfast Club, like done in the '60s, and we brought it back.
Yes.
So it involves culture, and it involves food, and it involves the community, and everyone gets excited about it. And so, in a setting like that, then I think maybe you can bring in someone to speak about, hey, I was at the breakfast in the '60s. This is what we did, and this is what it was about, and this is what was happening at the time. And then maybe have a little section where it showcases some of the items from that time period or whatever. So again, we're not so far removed from the time period that it's like you can show them like, oh, this was how they made food 500 years ago. I mean, it's like the food 30 years ago is pretty similar, relatively speaking, than it is today. So, what's historic and everything else is all relative. But at the same time, I think that there are, again, things that are happening even 50 or 100 years ago that will never happen again. And so I think for our youth that don't know that, I mean, again, I grew up without a cell phone. If you go talk to a kid under 25 years old, they're like, they don't even know what we would say to that, right? It's like, so I think it's just a matter of what, your perspective on what history is relative to the timing. But again, I think it could be definitely showcased in a way that I think would make it interesting to the youth around here. Will you get everyone? No, but that's like anything else, right? You'll get some kids that'll like it and some that won't. But I think again, the more you can involve food, culture, music, entertainment, social media. I mean, those are the kind of things. Maybe there's a social media contest you could do with history, like go tag 5 historic buildings downtown with this kind of architecture, or go eat in 5 restaurants in historic buildings. I mean, who knows? But again, something simple like that at least get some buzz going. And I'm just thinking out loud. But
oh no, those are awesome ideas. What would be your favorite historic building in downtown?
That's a good question. I would say there's probably 2 historic buildings that I think I have the most attraction to. I would say it would be the Yost Theater and the Spurgeon Building.
Gotcha.
The Yost Theater my family owns today, and I think it's been very influential in the revitalization that's happened over the last decade or so. I also think it's a very historical landmark from what's happened there inside the theater for almost 100 years, over 100 years at this point. It was built in 1912. So the history there, and again the influence and impact it's had, I think is really critical. And then the Spurgeon Building, I just think is the iconic building downtown. If you think of the city of Santa Ana and historic buildings, that's kind of the one you think of. My family actually owned that building as well back in the day, but sold it I think in the 70s. So
Gotcha.
no personal tie to it at this point, but again a beautiful building, and really I think it's just a centerpiece of the downtown.
Are you able to comment on the OC streetcar and how
Sure.
that will impact
Absolutely.
4th Street?
Yeah, look, I've heard pros and cons of the streetcar, and everyone has their own opinion like anything else, especially in Santa Ana. But I think it's one of those things where I went to school in downtown LA at USC in 2005. And when I went to school there was minimal mass transit. They were starting this system of we got this line, that line. It was like, okay, well, something. But I mean, I go to any other city, a metropolitan city in the country, and it's like this is not a great, really a great system. Well, go to that system today. 10, 15 years later, and that's a legit system. I mean, is it New York City or Washington, D.C.? No, but it's a legitimate system. And so I think that, to me, this is the first spoke of many. And back to what I mentioned earlier about how dense Orange County really is and how big of a metropolitan area it really is, I think we need mass transit. The traffic is only getting worse, and it's not going to get better. So I think that the streetcar will help start that wave mentally for the community and in the Orange County demographic as a whole, but also provide at least some service with access to the Civic Center, Garden Grove, the downtown, and obviously Sardec, the train station, which again connects to Union Station and San Diego and everywhere else. So I think there's some connectivity there that will help and will add some value. And the big thing too is with any streetcar or any sort of mass transit, generally speaking, you get I believe 7 times your investment, 8 times your investment on the project line. And so this is a $300 million project. You're talking about $2 billion of investment along a 4-mile corridor. $2 billion investment along a 4-mile corridor is a lot of investment and a lot of impact. So I think that's the biggest thing, is this will trigger, I think, a lot of development and a lot of interest in the area, which ultimately will help the area. And again, I think it's for the first spoke of many. I think ultimately this needs to connect to Disneyland and the Arctic Station, and then from there, maybe John Wayne Airport and everywhere else. But I think that this is, again, the first piece of the puzzle, and I commend, the county and, frankly, Mayor Polito and others who have really pushed it. I know they've gotten some flack for it. I know there's been some challenges, and this is not an easy project to pull off. But I think that, again, the benefit that it'll have for the city long term will be very influential.
I do not make enough to own a home in Santa Ana yet, but I am working towards that. What do you have to say for a person like me who is trying to climb that ladder to home ownership in a economic community that far outreaches what I can afford right now?
Sure. I mean, look, I don't have a good answer. I mean, I wish I did. I think the reality is again, like I alluded to earlier, I mean, the cost of living in this county is insane. I mean, it really is. And I drive down the street every day and I ask myself how people live. I don't get it. I mean, I live in a pretty well-to-do area, and I don't even understand how they all afford to live the way they do. So I can only imagine, and again, a lower or lesser income community, how they afford to pay the bills and afford to pay rent and send their kids to school and all these different things. So I appreciate the challenges and the complexities that they're here in the city, and I wish I had a better answer, but I really don't. I think the reality is all you can do is put yourself in the best position possible to succeed in life, and that's getting a good education, being a good person, and working hard. And if you do those things, hopefully over time you'll be able to afford something to live and to buy in. And I think the reality is my generation, our generation, more millennials are not going to be buying homes. Not only because they can't afford them, but because they don't want to. They don't want to be tied down to a home. They don't want to be tied down to the maintenance of a home. They want to have flexibility. They might want to be more nomadic or moving around more. So I think also in these urban settings, there's less for sale product. A lot of it's rentable product. So
Yeah.
for all those reasons, I think that as much as home ownership is something that is part of the American dream, quote unquote, in my humble opinion, I think it's going a little away from there. Now, not to say that's right or wrong, or I'm okay or not okay with that, but I just think that's the reality of what's happening with the trends. So, at some point, hopefully you can afford to buy a house in the city, and I think if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll be able to. But at the end of the day, again, that's something that is really out of my control.
With the growth patterns happening in America, I'm seeing a lot of mimicking between what has happened in Japan. Can you draw a clear correlation between what's happening in Japan, what's happening in Southern California, and the United States as a whole?
I'm not that familiar with Japan. I was actually supposed to go on a trip there before my wife got pregnant, so
Okay.
that didn't happen. But the one thing I do know about Japan that I think is very similar to what's happening here is the size of units. So one thing that we're building apartments above 4th Street Market right now. We're building, they're not micro units, because I think the definition is
SROs?
under 400 feet or something like
Yeah.
that. But ours are between 450 and about 700 feet. So pretty small for, rentable apartment spaces. And, if you go to China or Japan, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, you're seeing spaces done at 200, 300 square feet with the most efficient, or even less than that, with the most efficient layouts and, drawers under your bed, and then this pops out and that pops out and this. So,
Yes.
I mean, I see more and more of that happening because, again, like, at the end of the day, like, in part of this is part of my argument for the city of not having as much open space as I'm required for my project is, look at, the downtown's the open space. 4th Street Market's the open space. These millennials don't need a big living room and a big kitchen.
Yeah.
They want to go be able to hang out in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's more about you need a bed and a bathroom, and maybe somewhere to put your clothes, and your bike maybe. Beyond that, the idea of needing all this space to cook a big meal and have a big living room and all these things, I mean, that's just kind of going away. Now, do some people still want that? Sure. And some people still living in suburbia? Sure. I mean, these are not like end alls or everything, but at the end of the day, I think that trend is going to definitely keep playing where you're going to see smaller and smaller units. And again, more of the amenities outside of the actual project, where it's more the downtown or the neighborhood that they're located in.
What fatherly advice do you have for the children of Santa Ana and Orange
Sure.
County?
Okay. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest thing is you have to create your own opportunities. You create your own luck. At the end of the day, do you get lucky sometimes? Sure. Was I lucky to be born to a well-to-do family? Sure. Yes. But at the end of the day, you got to work hard. You got to continue to work hard. And you can't, I don't think you can get arrogant about it. You know what I mean? I think you need to stay humble, no matter how successful you are or whatever else. And I've come to see personally from people that I do business with and whatnot is, you can tell a lot by a person and how they act and how they treat people, And I think for me, I've always been taught to treat the guy at the counter, the guy emptying the trash, and the billionaire all the same. And I think that's, really critical pieces. Everyone's a human being. Everyone should be treated fairly. And I think, working hard will help you create your own luck. And put you in the best position to be successful. Getting a good education is obviously critical. I think, in today's world especially, I think networking is really critical. I think getting out there and meeting people, whether it's a mixer or whether it's just literally being out of your house in the streets. I mean, things happen when collisions are created. And so, the more people you bump into, or the more people you work with, or the more people you did a project with, just that the more you're out there and the more you're going to kind of get immersed in the community and the business community. And again, as that happens, more doors do open.
Well, I think that is a really nice ending to that.
Great.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.